Hey, it's that time again. Time for another episode of Shelve It or Shove It, the completely superficial way to pick books for your TBR based solely on their covers. I am your host, Daisy X Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. In this game, I'll be looking at Goodreads new releases, looking only at their covers to pick one book for my TBR for September, and we'll be looking at science fiction, fantasy, and horror. So let's jump right into science fiction. And first up is The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey, who is, of course, the author of The Expanse, and as we know, that is two authors writing under this pseudonym. I loved The Expanse. I thought it was fantastic, and I loved the Sci-Fi Channel / Amazon Prime series based on the novel. I thought it was really good. Anyway, this, I don't know if this is in the Expanse universe. It says The Mercy of Gods, author of The Expanse. I'm going to guess no, because this cover doesn't look anything like any of the, well, maybe. I'm going to say no, though. I think this is a new separate series or standalone. I hope it's a standalone by James S.A. Corey. I like this cover a lot. I like these, I guess they're runes or something going up around it, kind of curved, and maybe they're in a bubble. I do like this cover, so of course I'm going to shelve it. Next up is Hum by Helen Phillips. I don't know what to make of this cover. It looks like green leaves, and then there's like these dots with lines. It kind of looks like some type of game, maybe. I don't like this artwork at all, and it doesn't tell me anything about what the story could be about. So I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is Full Speed to a Crash Landing by Beth Revis. Well, the cover is definitely telling me a story. It's telling me the story of this spaceship that's crash landed. I kind of like this sort of cartoony artwork for this. There's a silhouette of a man and a woman. I'm kind of hoping it's not a rom-sci. That's romantic science fiction. I don't think I'm going to be into this one. I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is Luca by S.B. Divya. Kirkus says it's jaw-dropping. I like this cover. I like the sort of realistic artwork of this valley or whatever, this not chasm, but there's these two mountains that's very green, and it looks like there's a person and a robot, or maybe two robots, sort of looking out over this. I'm going to guess that Loka is a planet. Anyway, I like this cover. I'm going to shelve it. And finally, in science fiction, Glass Houses by Madeline Ashby. Tagline is, someone is always watching. And it's kind of cool. This is kind of cool. There's this house, I guess on an island maybe, and there's, I'm guessing, a red sun behind it. But then underneath it, there is another house that's being blown up by a laser. So maybe it's being watched from another dimension. And in this other dimension, they're going to destroy the house. I'm intrigued. I am intrigued by this one. I'm going to shelve it. Now we move on to fantasy. And first up is Lady Macbeth by Ava Reed. Now, Lady Macbeth is, of course, one of the most interesting of Shakespeare's female characters, very layered, very spooky. I'm going to say this is a ghost story, maybe. And I like this artwork. I like this sort of woman looking straight at you with sort of a soulful expression, but very white, very washed out. I like it. I'm going to shelve it. Next up is A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. T. Kingfisher's one of my favorite authors recently, and I definitely want to read this book, and I know I will read this book, but this cover is not doing it for me. There's sort of these beige trees and some stars, so I'd rather see a picture of the sorceress. I mean, sorceress is in the cover. Yeah, I can't in good conscience pick this just for this cover. This is T. Kingfisher, so I know I'm going to read this novel one day, but it's not going to be today. Not based on this cover. I'm going to have to shove it. And next is Hera by Jennifer Saint. You know, there's been so many Greek retellings that I'm not really interested in a Greek retelling of Hera. Not like I would be with Lady Macbeth, which seems a little bit more interesting to me. And this artwork isn't that great. I'm not impressed. So I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is The Dead Cat Tail Assassins by P. Djeli Clark. I have been wanting to read this author for a while, and I like this cover more than I did the last one with the hood, the ring shout. So it looks like, obviously a person of color. It looks like an assassin, maybe some type of superhero. I am wondering about Dead Cat Tail Assassins. It sounds kind of unique. And I like this artwork. I'm going to shelve it. And finally, in fantasy, Voyage of the Damned by Frances White. There will be magic, there will be murder is the tagline. And the title doesn't sound very original to me. Does it to you? I think that's a movie or something. Anyway, there's this flower or seaweed with a ship and a bones of a fish. I don't really like this artwork. It looks a little bit washed out. I'm not impressed by the title. It sounds like it's been done before. I'm going to have to shove it. Now we move on to horror. And I am pulling this from the horror section of Goodreads, and they put in a whole bunch of new horror titles. I'm only going for the first 5, but I'm wondering why horror isn't included in their sort of monthly recap that I use for science fiction and fantasy. Anyway, that doesn't really matter. First up is I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. I didn't like the last novel I read by Stephen Graham Jones, The Good Little Indians, and this cover isn't that interesting. It's just sort of this hood, and you can't see the person, maybe a ghost story, but it says teenage slasher, and I'm not interested in slasher horror. I'm more interested in supernatural horror. Font is kind of interesting, but it won't save this novel for me. I'm going to shove it. Next up is In the Lonely Hours by Shannon Morgan. Very uninteresting for a horror novel. I guess it's a haunted house story or haunted castle story. There's some vines, dark clouds. Looks very generic to me. I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. You can make a killing in Hollywood is the tagline. If you don't know who Chuck Tingle is, he is sort of the adult ex-porno writer who got nominated for Hugo because some people thought it would be funny. It was like this bizarre joke. And I've been wanting to read a Chuck Tingle book just to say I've read a Chuck Tingle book. And will it be this one? It reminds me of Palm Springs because there are these palm trees, Bury Your Gaze. It has sort of that very Art Deco type color scheme, which reminds me of Palm Springs or maybe Miami Beach. And I think this is going to be a slasher type horror. I'm assuming it's going to be funny and it's going to be very X-rated, but I don't like slasher stories. Again, for my horror, I like it supernatural. Sorry, Chuck, not this time. I'm going to have to shut it. Next up is The Book of Elsewhere by Keanu Reeves and China Miéville. I am so freaking curious about this. Keanu Reeves, of course, is the actor who was in The Matrix and a whole bunch of other movies. Johnny Mnemonic. And China Miéville is what I call a diesel punk author who has written some gorgeous, fantastic works. And I am trying to think of any reason why I can pick this because the cover is kind of bizarre. I don't know what it is. It looks like a skull, and I don't know what that sort of curved thing is overlaid on it. Almost looks like headphones and a night sky. This cover is horrible. This is a horrible cover, but I am so interested in what this book could be about and if it's any good. Someone please let me know down in the comments. But based on this cover, I'm going to have to shove it. And our final novel in horror is Castle of the Cursed by Romina Garber. Tagline is, "The house is always hungry." So, haunted house story, haunted castle story from the cover. We see this little bit of blood. And I'm not crazy about this illustration of the castle. It looks kind of cheap. Can I say that? I don't like it. I'm going to have to shove it. Okay, I don't know how this happened. I shelved 5 books, 3 sci-fi, 2 fantasy, 0 horror. But in science fiction, we have The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey. We have Loca by S.D. Diva and Glass Houses by Madeline Ashby. In fantasy, we have Lady Macbeth by Eva Reed and The Dead Cattail Assassins by P. Djeli Clark. Okay, this is tough. I like all of these for very, very different reasons. I'm really curious about the James S.A. Corey, hopefully new non-expanse novels. Loca just has a gorgeous cover. Glass Houses, I think, is telling some type of story about getting spied on from another dimension and looks very high concept sci-fi to me. Lady Macbeth, I love that character in Shakespeare. I'm curious to see a whole novel written from her point of view. The Dead Cattail Assassins, I want to read a novel by P. Djeli Clark, and this one looks interesting. Okay, I'm just going by the cover on this one, because the one my eye keeps going back to is Glass Houses by Madeline Ashby. I think that cover is telling me a story, and I'm really curious about it. So, Glass Houses, Madeline Ashby. Let's go ahead and read the blurb and see what I've gotten myself into. A masterful near-future whodunit for fans of Glass Onion and Black Mirror. Join a stranded startup team led by a terrifyingly realistic, charismatic billionaire, a deserted tropical island, and a mysterious AI-driven mansion as the remaining members disappear one by one. A group of employees and their CEO celebrating the sale of their remarkable emotion mapping AI algorithm crash onto a not quite deserted tropical island. Luckily, those who survived have found a beautiful, fully stocked private palace with all the latest technological updates, though one without connection to the outside world. The house, however, has more secrets than anyone might have guessed, and much darker reason for having been built and left behind. Kristen, the hyper-competent human emotional support technician, i.e., the eccentric, boyish billionaire CEO Sumter's idea of an HR department, tries to keep her colleagues stable throughout this new challenge. But staying sane seems to be as much of a challenge as staying alive. Being a woman in technology has always meant having to be smarter than anyone expects, and Kristen's survival skills are more impressive than anyone knows. Okay, once again, this is totally not what I was expecting, but I'm kind of excited about this one. Glass Onion and Black Mirror, survival on a deserted island, bizarre CEO and group of employees trying to solve a mystery, and I do like a good mystery. So I'm kind of excited about this one. But what about you? What book or books would you have picked based solely on their covers? Let me know down in the comments. And while you're there, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.